what is your life vision? How do you want to live your life? What do your weekends look like? How many vacations do you end up taking a year? What does your living that life look like? And then let's reverse engineer it backwards. We all know this stuff doesn't happen overnight, but once you start casting a vision for your own life, and at some point you start casting a better vision for your business, then things start to fall into place.
Mike, you've had a lot of change in just a couple of years. And I want to go back for someone that may not know you, may not know about your organization, may not know about your nonprofit. And I just want you to tell us a little bit of where you were. You and I probably had just started working together, or maybe hadn't yet, but there was pain, right? There was like frustration, and I'd love to get a sense of how you would describe that, knowing that someone else might be also in that pain and not feel like there's a way out. So walk me back to that was January of 2023. And there was a lot of emotion going on in running your business.
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely a pivotal time in my life and in the business as well. Joining the mastermind group that we're in a few years prior to that was the start of all the change internally for me, mentally, physically, spiritually, all of that. And at the same time, I was probably running my business for 20 years at the time or something like that. And never really having a coach, never really having mentors, never having or knowing people that were in this space, outside of competitors in our local area. And, when you never go to school to do what you're doing and nobody's teaching you, coaching you, leading you, you just tend to go through the school of hard knocks. You just go with your gut and you tend to do things that seem to make sense at the time. And of course, in the beginning, you're wearing a lot of hats and through the pain points that you want to start taking hats off, but nobody can do it as good as me, right? It's that mentality.
Right. You're special.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Super special. And then struggling with hiring the right employees and hiring, and firing really slow because they're not the right employee. All those things are game changers, but what vision I thought I had wasn't the vision that I ultimately wanted, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. And that's really the key component to all of this, I believe.
So I remember the phone call you had called me. It was December. I was sitting at my brother's house, and I remember it because my brother has a photo of me. I'm sitting on my motorcycle and waiting outside because in his house didn't have service. And there was pain, right? There was a degree of dude, I don't want to do this anymore. Can you just tell us what was happening in your mind at that point? Because I think that might help paint not only how far you've come, but the sentiment of where someone else might be.
Yeah. So looking back then, I had, I think 4 employees at the time, one of which had been with me for, I don't know, I think 15-ish years at the time. Super loyal guy, great human being, limited capacity, right? He gets it. He wants it, doesn't have the capacity. His heart's there. He would bend over backwards for me, just like I would for him. But it was at a point where the business outgrew him. He couldn't deliver what I needed. And then I had trouble with the leadership team, if you will. And at that time, I didn't even call it that. It was just, I need someone to come in and, be my COO, not even knowing what the term integrator was or what that visionary integrator relationship is. And so, I was making bad hires. I wasn't making the best decisions in terms of what people were telling me, and maybe not vetting them hard enough, or using a recruiter to let them vet everybody and then put 5 in front of me or whatever. And so there was a lot of hires that had good intentions, but just couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, right? And so it was constantly falling back on me. I mean, there's so many, birthdays and holidays and everything that I'd missed because I was just all in, wearing all those hats, taking the hat off, putting it back on. And, that was the biggest constant I had, was that struggle, and it hurt and it was killing me and it was affecting my relationships. And cause I was, I'd go home at night and my wife was getting the worn out, tired Mike. Um, and although she can empathize for it, there's a point where she goes, I'm sick of this. This sucks. Like, why are we doing this? Like, do we need this money? Do we like, what does that look like? Why are we
Yeah.
where we're at?
Is it all worth it?
Yeah. And plus two, she had lived through me being deployed for 2 years during that 20-ish years. Um, and I don't know, I think you guys ended up doing a retreat that somehow got sent out. And I was just like, this sounds kind of good. This probably be good for me to just let my guard down, get away for the weekend and not work that weekend. Cause there was a ton of weekends that I was still working. Um, really try to focus on me and where I was going because internally I felt like a mess. People probably looked at me and thought I was well put together and was running a successful business, but it was going nowhere. We were capped at a revenue. We hit that ceiling and we just couldn't bust through it. I couldn't let go of mine. I couldn't get out of my own way. Um, and so you guys brought that retreat to me, and that was a big pivotal moment. And it's just kind of that mentality, right? Like we as operators sometimes go, nobody can do it as good as me, right? It's that mentality. Nobody can do it as good as me. And somebody had said something to me at some point, and they're like, well, what if they can do it 80% as good as you or 90% as good as you? Will that work? And I'm like, yeah, I would make that work. Um, and when you've got the culture and you've got the vision, things just, fall into place at that point.
Okay. So Mike, what I'm hearing is that you were taking on your employee overload, or you were taking on their responsibilities when they couldn't quite deliver, feeling burnt out, feeling stressed, missing holidays, not connected with spouse, not like present at home like you want to be. You're getting leftovers to the people you care about. And I know at that point, there's like this, I want out of pain. There's this moment where you'll probably do anything to get out of pain. Easier said than done when you're in that, because you can't just wake up tomorrow and have it solved. There have been a couple things though that probably happened during that moment, right? If you look at it just as pain, you're willing to make any kind of change when you hit rock bottom, right? Any idea will fly. What had you tried to get to a place of this will be different this time?
Well, I guess maybe a little bit of context too, to help frame that question or that answer, I should say, is, being an infantry guy in the military for almost my whole entire career. I mean, the motto is suck it up and drive on, right? It's pain is your friend. Grit is something that's admirable. And, the living in, times where you're just constantly grinding all the time and you're constantly hurting, you're constantly feeling pain. You tend to get numb to it after a while. So it does take some sort of significant buildup or event to happen to where you decide that, okay, enough's enough. When we did the retreat, that's really where everything that was a tipping point. For whatever reason, it just built up. And I think I had to let an employee go right before that because I think it was towards the end of the year. But unfortunately, sometimes it takes you as the operator longer to get out of it and everybody else sees it but you. Uh, and I think you guys had framed something during the course of that weekend. It was something like, okay, what percentage of your work are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm doing 100% of it. They were trying to. And then the question was brought up, well, how much are you doing of this project manager's and your office manager? And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm doing 30% of hers and 50% of his. And you guys added it all up and you're writing this down on the whiteboard as I'm talking. And I looked at it and I was just like, holy cow. It just hit me. It was like a ton of bricks upside the head that you have to stop. This is not healthy. It's in so many different ways.
Yeah, dude. It's incredibly easy to take on small bits of responsibilities from employees, and all of a sudden you're at 180%, right? Which is why you're toasted, burnt out all the time. Okay, so we have a good understanding of where this all began, right? I'm trying to grow. I want to accelerate. I want something bigger. But when you're in that kind of pain, and I know this story in the veteran sense because of what we're going to talk about as we go through this, but you're like just willing to be in the pain as a vet that has been in probably worse scenarios. But we have a conversation. You get to see that things are not going to go well, and it starts to open up this cavern of, oh, I've actually got to do something different, right? Call it rock bottom. You got a place for change. Flash forward a little bit, things look different now. So give me a little bit of a synopsis of what your day-to-day looks like, what your business looks like, and then you can share a little bit about Freedom for Heroes, because we're going to go that way.
Yeah, I think, prior to that, that retreat that you guys did, I was probably working, really 6, 7 days a week, not having weekends off. Holidays to me were like, it's time to catch up. Nobody's going to bother you. Just get on that computer and grind through it all day. Yep. Christmas presents first thing in the morning, but I got to get to work. And, it's not an exaggeration when you look at it over time. And the mentality back then was, and the goals were all revenue based, right? It was like, okay, we've been hitting this ceiling. We need to bust through, and we need to get to this in 1 year, and this in 3 years, and 5 years, and 10 years, or whatever. And actually, I wasn't even looking out that far. So I was just looking like this, right? Like, how do I get myself a free weekend? We were a custom home building company and remodeling company. And so we're in a thriving environment to begin with here in Scottsdale. And there's so much work out there, and the demand is very high, and there's not enough good contractors. So even bad contractors can be extremely busy in that type of market. And us being in business for a long time, there's a lot of relationships. So we were pretty successful in terms of getting work very easily on a referral basis. And so that was kind of my battle rhythm, if you will, my weekly 6, 7 days a week. And my wife worked on Saturdays for whatever reason. So it was kind of like, I didn't have to have an excuse because she's working, I'm going to work, and nobody will know the difference. And then Sundays I was always trying to work very little or not at all. But it just burned me out beyond, what I was even used to. And I used to say that when I get to that point, I'm like, it's like I'm going into deployment mode, because I'm going to be gone for a year and a half, and you're not getting hardly any days off. And I just have such a high tolerance for, I guess, suffering at some, to some level.
Yeah, for sure. What does now look like?
So I think once we got past the revenue conversations and the goals of revenue, and it was really more about like, okay, revenue goals are great. Whatever your financial goals are for your own financial independence and all that stuff is important, and you should track those metrics. But it was really more about, what is your life vision? How do you want to live your life? What do your weekends look like? How many vacations do you end up taking a year? How is your relationship? What is your living that life look like? And then let's reverse engineer it backwards. And we all know this stuff doesn't happen overnight, but once you start casting a vision for your own life, and at some point you start casting a better vision for your business, then things start to fall into place, right? Like, culture, extremely important. The CEO is responsible for culture, vision, resource allocation. All those things are extremely important. You can hire somebody that might not have the skills exactly what you need, but if they're the right person, they understand your culture, they follow your culture, and they're teachable and coachable, that is almost more important than finding someone who's got the skills, but they're horrible for your culture, right? And so, we slowly started making changes, made a few better hires. And then, when things start to go in the direction that you want. This has always been a lesson for me. Like, once I feel like I get to a certain point, I'm like, okay, I can breathe now. I'm going to take some time off. And a lot of times for me, time off is, a weekend, taking a weekend off, or
right, 2 days.
Yeah. Or an extended weekend with my wife. But a lot of it too is we go to these mastermind events, and, they're 3 or 4 days. So you're still working. You're still not totally shutting down. And again, these things don't happen overnight, but you get to the point where, you start seeing some change, and I started grabbing some time. And then it seems like every time I started taking more time off, then the wheels of the bus would fall back off again. I was like, oh my God, like, how do I get through this? And it was almost like a slap in the face, because it's like you you took advantage of the time too much now. And so that's something that I'm sort of going through again right now. Honestly, we talked about it yesterday a little bit, but um, ultimately I got to a point where there was another custom home builder here in Scottsdale that I've known for quite a while. And he got to the point where he was retiring, and he asked me to come in one day and talk to him. Kind of caught me off guard, honestly. And was like, he basically was like, I'm done. I'm retiring. I turn 65 next month. And can you take over my employees? Can you take over my, move into my office? And he really didn't have any work. That everything was pretty much winding down. But we were still in growth mode. And at the same time, coincidentally, I had a 10-year employee, love her to death. Kind of a crazy story. We'd given her this big bonus at her 10th year, made a big deal of it in front of all the employees. And like 2 weeks later, she basically came to me and said, I'm pregnant with my second child. And as you know, and I don't want to come back to work. I want to be a full-time mom. And so it was like, oh my God, like once again, I feel like I'm gaining traction. But again, not playing the victim, I immediately realized like, why did this other, friend of mine, this other builder come to me? That's things happening for me. Right. So it's like, okay, well, they have an office manager who's an absolute rock star, and they had another project manager, and we were struggling operationally running the jobs we had because we had too much work. So it solved the office manager problem, and it solved the project manager problem. And then they had a guy, a design, basically an architect, not a licensed architect, but that was on the team as well. And then just another total curveball in the middle of this negotiation with him and I, like how we were going to work through this and navigate through this merger, if you will. It wasn't a typical M&A deal. It was really more of me just taking over his employees. But my integrator at the time came to me and said, I'm done. I want to go be a priest. It's just like, are you serious? Like, what do you say to that? Right. Like, but with the new office manager coming in to be the new integrator, it all just kind of flowed together. And the two outbound employees, if you will, did an excellent job of that transition. But we're at the tail end of that now, that tail end of that merger, transitioning through everything, building new systems, updating systems and processes. And as you know, you can't scale without having that stuff written down.
Yeah. Well, would you say that you're working less hours now?
I'm working a lot less hours. Yeah, I would say that on the Peak One Builder side, I'm probably putting in about maybe 25 hours a week.
Amazing. So, I mean, that's a dramatic change just as far as hours.
Yeah, it's probably half of what I was doing 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Is revenue higher or lower?
It's actually, we're hitting the highest revenue that we've ever had. We had a 50% increase from last year.
Incredible. Team, do you feel better about the team's capacities?
I do. Yeah, I feel like they all live the core values. I feel like the culture is excellent. And that's one thing we've pretty much always been relatively good at, is having a good culture. So that's never been really an issue. But the systems and processes piece of it is a little bit challenging because, hey, we used to do it this way and we do it this way. So what's the right way? And so there's been a lot of collaboration and a little bit of pushback because, when you do things your way and they do things their way, it's,
you're merging two lanes, two highways, two cars.
It's uncomfortable. It's a little bit of friction, and it's harder, quite honestly, right? And it's not seamless.
So we get it. We have a good understanding of where you started, right? Burnout, frustration, overwhelm, those kinds of emotions. And now there's another side where you're working less hours. You're able to craft a team, focus on culture, really hone in on what matters to you. And that is night and day, right? I'm so proud of all the changes that you've made. I wanted someone to get a sense of those two ends of the spectrum, because it often doesn't feel like it's possible in the middle or when you're burning out.
Yeah.
Part of that has been you and I having a lot of conversations about what do you want and where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And one of the first conversations that I think was really transformational was looking at this tool that EOS, I'm a big fan of the EOS engine, but the vision tool itself really perpetuating a problem. So that tool is the VTO, right? You put your vision down, and the first thing that it calls out is like, what's your revenue?
Right.
And I'd love to hear your take on this now, because then it was your vision was very much about revenue, and that forced you to be like this juggernaut, grinding, working, fighting, climbing. Whereas now you're driven by something different. So, what do you think having a revenue as a driver for your vision did to you? Did that make you overwork? Did that make you focus on the wrong things? Where was your head when the vision was a revenue goal?
I think you get caught up in metrics. I think which don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm very analytical and I'm very metric driven, but I think you're so hyper focused on it that sometimes you can lose maybe some focus on what's happening in the company. And how's Bob and Sally's home life, and are they actually happy? Are they going online and they're looking to see what salaries are? You don't see those things, right? You often see the result of it. It's too late at that point. But I think, when you focus nothing on but revenue, I just, from a philosophical or spiritual level, it doesn't serve me well. And I think that at the end of the day, people want financial independence, right? That's why we're an entrepreneur. One of the reasons. So you do need to focus on it to some extent, but it's this crock pot over microwave thinking. It's taking the stairs versus the elevator, slowing things down in time and being able to analyze and use, people like yourself that are helping me see more clear. And to be honest, like what I thought was my vision wasn't really my vision. We've talked about this, like you helped me create something I didn't know I wanted, or I should say maybe I didn't know how I wanted it or how to get there. I mean, ultimately I was looking for time freedom so I can get rid of the pain, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it was coming down to. Um, that mentality of just throw money at a problem. I mean, sometimes that works and a lot of times it doesn't. But to turn around and go, okay, this is how I think I'd like to live my life. I want to work X amount of hours per week. I want my for-profit business to fund part of my nonprofit, and I want to be able to give back time-wise, not just stroking a check to a nonprofit or a church or whatever that looks like in terms of my genuine contributions, giving back, and being able to build and scale that nonprofit because I have the time to do it because I've got the right people in place. You've made the right hires. You're paying them very well, and so it all seems to start to fall into place.
Man, the piece that is most exciting about what you're doing now, and I want to give you some airtime to talk about the vision today, is how far it's come. Right, the magic of your story is not just where you are today; it's how dramatic the shift has been. So you have this revenue goal, and it's driving you the wrong direction. Right, you're not paying attention to how the team feels. You're not paying attention to what the providing experience is like to customers. Like you're just myopic on like the metric that is revenue, and that ultimately starts to take you the wrong direction. You and I sit down, long story made very short, we start crafting this whole new vision. And one of those questions was, hey, what would you do if you sold your business? And I'll never forget you telling me, because it's come up multiple times through our work together, that dude, I would build more homes. There was this clarity in like, it's not like I don't like my work. I think you just didn't like the business. And as we've changed, asking you the question of, hey, what would you do if you sold it? The loudest and most resonant answer I've ever gotten came from you. You were like, I want to go help vets. That opened up a whole world of could we design something different? And for the last year and a half, we've been crafting this idea of you impacting veterans through the lens of doing better in business. For someone on the outside, they might think that's impossible, that you can't do well and do good. And I'd love to hear your take on it now that it's underway, now that the flywheel is starting to emerge, because this is a very big different. It is a very big change from the vision that you had of more revenue today? Now it's a completely redesigned version of you and version of your business identity.
Yeah, I think, we've had some discussions about the art and the science of anything, right? And um, the vision that I'm, you know, crafted now, and the way I'm living my life, is a lot of it is, how do I feel, right? Like, am I feeling burned out? Am I feeling like I'm not pouring into the one company or the other? Um, and by hiring the right people, mainly my integrator, and she runs the office, the financial side. She's got the science side of it, right? She's got those metrics, so I don't have to focus on those. Like, I'm looking at a dashboard or a scorecard, however you want to phrase that, and I don't have to be in the weeds on that stuff. Um, she's got that, and it's far less time that I have involved in it. It's like, put it in front of me, I'm looking at it, I'm looking for trends and what have you. And so it's more of the art side of things of, yeah, this has been great. I'm taking a lot of weekends off. In fact, it's very rare that I have to work a Saturday or whatever. Um, and that is just an absolute exponential dramatic change in itself. And so that vision is just a lot more about how I'm feeling. And then, of course, there's a lot of things in the business itself that, how do the employees feel? What's that culture look like? And still maintaining a pulse on that. But, it has allowed me then to build this other nonprofit that is very important to me. And because, I served, 21 years, and I've lost 6 people in the last, 6 years at this point. And I felt like I needed to do something to give back. And I questioned myself, like, is this even possible? Like, it sounds like great on paper, but you got to run a multi-million-dollar, knocking on 8-figure business. And you're going to go start some other company, and I had this conversation with you. I had a wife, like, is this something we really want to get into? Because you were complaining about working too much before, and then you're going to throw this on your plate now.
This is good. Yeah.
So it's interesting, because all the things that I've learned through the building company that, and I didn't know anything about nonprofits. So when you don't know about something, it's the who, not how, right? You're just going to find your who's to carry out your vision as the visionary. You're going to try to find yourself an integrator eventually that can take your vision that you're casting and execute it, make it happen. So that's a huge piece, because, I wouldn't have done that before, especially starting a business. And it's interesting. I started that company 24 years ago. I forgot what it was like to start a company. There's a lot of administrative stuff, but all that stuff for me was a who, not how. I don't have time to deal with that. You guys solved that problem for me. And we were using my administrative side of my builder's company to do a lot of this stuff. That's wearing the hats in the beginning, and those hats will come off over time, and they already have in some respects. But to say that it can't be done, and can't, build a for-profit company and still do good to the community, whether it's a veteran community or church or, whatever it is, I would say is you're probably, lying to yourself.
Yeah. This idea of having 2 organizations for most people would feel impossible. It almost seems as you would be doubling your workload. You're in the middle of running both of these things. One is a fast growing custom home company. The other is an impact based nonprofit to help veterans through their emotional and their logistical challenges post service. And what I notice is, I'm on the outside, but I'm close in proximity. So I notice a guy that went from being a manager and constantly in the operator seat of the business to you thinking, running your business differently and leading as a visionary. That again feels far-fetched, I'm sure, to many, where adding more responsibility, adding more intention, adding even something like impact feels like something you got to do way later, right? I've got to sell the business. I've got to make millions and millions and millions. I got to have millions in the bank, but you've managed to do it now. If someone is in the phase of burnout and they're starting to craft a vision, or maybe they have a vision of something bigger and brighter, what would you say to them that would help them get to where you are, where you're now running both organizations, but you're not sweating, you're not working every weekend, you're not overloaded with tasks, you're not stressed and burnt out, you're spending more time with your wife, you're spending more time with people that you like and that you love. What message would you have for that person that's still taking grenades?
I think, everybody kind of deals with things in their, when they're by themselves and how they, navigate these conversations in their head and the narrative that they tell themselves. And oftentimes this isn't that bad. It's not that bad. We have that mentality, and it's just like, until that pain hits, then it is that bad. But if you don't have the self-awareness to see that you're getting in your own way, you're holding your company back. The one thing that was extremely beneficial to me was, I'm going to go find someone that can help coach me and mentor me. So I can break through whatever ceiling it is that I'm trying to break through, whether that's a revenue goal, or for me, it was more of getting the time freedom so I can build the second business to really give back to a community that really needs it right now. And so I think self-awareness is huge. And if you're going to continue to BS yourself and tell yourself a certain narrative, it's not that bad. If you're saying it's not that bad, that's probably a huge key. Like, you probably need some help, and you probably should reach out.
It's that bad.
Yeah. And everybody's got a different tolerance for their own BS and the narratives that they tell themselves. But to get a team behind you, whether they're employees or, consultants, coaches, mentors, we did something kind of crazy that I got, a little bit criticized by my integrator at the time. And I just said, what got us here isn't going to get us there. We've heard that 1,000 times until you really realize what that means. And it's not like, you should always have that gap and gain mentality where, be where your feet are, celebrate the wins. Yeah. What got you here isn't going to get you to the next level. And you're going to take a lot of good things with you, culture and things like that, and good leadership skills. But at the end of the day, you've got to level up, and there's things that you have to do to do that leveling up. And for me, it was like, I just decided at like December of, what the heck was it, 22 or 23? I can't remember. I said, January 1st, we're going to hire a fractional CFO. We're getting a CMO. We're getting somebody to help us on the EOS side. You were already in place. And so putting everybody together, and then all that money that I'm shelling out in order to help this company grow in a healthy way, with someone looking through a different lens, the outside looking in. And I was like literally criticized, like, we can't do this. The company can't handle that. We're going to, one at a time, you're going to overload us. And it was just my mindset. Like, no, I'm confident that we'll be able to navigate through this. And it ultimately was a really good decision on my part. Now, not everybody probably is ready for something like that, but
you've had to make not only the bets financially on that, but you've also had to make some change, the way you lead, the way you operate, the way you think, all those things.
Yeah.
In running your business, where you're in burnout mode, there's a pattern, right? The pattern is typically like, I'm going to take on this. I'll handle it. Don't worry, I got it. I'll take my Saturday, no problem. But in leading something that is not only impact-based and also a growing company, your leadership has changed pretty dramatically over the last several years. How do you lead differently than you did before?
Well, it's interesting. My background of going through college to be an engineer, and at the same time, I was already serving in the National Guard as an enlisted soldier. And when I made the decision to go to become an officer, that's really when I started learning about leadership. It wasn't really ever taught to me. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have people. I didn't even know what the heck the definition of leadership was, but I just knew once I started that leadership training to become an officer, everything changed for me. Because you're put in the hot box, right? Like, it's high pressure, it's high stakes. It's, you better make a decision versus not making a decision. Even a wrong decision is better than not making a decision. So it's all that mentality, but it's also the military is a very direct style of leadership. It's not what you may experience in the civilian world. So for years, whatever it was, 15 years or so, being an officer in the military, and especially being an infantry officer, that's just another level of grit and suck it up and drive on and be hard. And, we wear this suit of armor and, we don't show weakness, in any respect. Um, and that's all I knew. So it drove who I was as a leader, how I led, very direct. And some people can't handle that direct style of leadership.
Yeah, it's very difficult for many.
Yeah. So at some point I realized, like, okay, this style of leadership probably isn't the best. Like it will work still to this day well for me. If I had, if I had to inject myself back into the military for some reason, I have no problem with it whatsoever. I would adapt in, minutes. But most people aren't used to that direct style of leadership. They need to be led in a way that there is, I guess, more of an art to it than a science, right? It's a little, uh, you can't necessarily attack it head on, but you've got to have some softness to it. There's got to be, I don't want to say coddling, but
yeah, some emotional intelligence though.
yeah. And so I think when that change happened too, in my head, that I started leading differently, and it was, I think, a lot more empowering and a lot more, giving people a lot more, free space to be able to do their own strategic thinking and, solve problems. And also a big thing for me was understanding this Socratic approach to problem solving and it was really hard because here I am. I have an engineering degree. I was an engineer. I've been a builder for 15 years. I got my military experience. Every time somebody would come to me with a problem, I have multiple answers for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna fix it right now.
Yeah. And I, once I broke that habit and I started turning it around on them and making them own, recognizing what the issue was and then coming up with solutions and then, collaborating together through those. Most of the time, as they go through that process, they understand that they had the answer the whole time. Dan Martell talks about the 1-3-1, which is a great approach too. But that's all a Socratic approach to how you solve a problem. Because if you're solving it for them, you're not helping. You may help it right then and there at that moment in time, that snapshot in time, but you're not developing that strategic thinking that needs to take place. And then a lot of positive reinforcing, and then a lot of, trying to be aware of celebrating the wins, I think all plays into that.
Yeah. If you keep answering the question, you just keep putting yourself back in the crosshairs of, well, we need Mike. We need Mike. Mike, you got to be here. Mike, you got to do this. Mike, you must save us.
Yeah.
And, what I've seen from you is no different than what most leaders go through. There's a sense of change when you're in pain that we all are willing to tolerate. But when it's not that bad, we're usually unwilling to make the change. And it got bad for you. Hopefully it doesn't need to get as bad for anybody listening. But now you show up as a leader. I feel like before you were like the manager, you were the boss, it was very militant, which is, is your history. You know that.
Yeah.
But that's not how the civilian world works. That's also not how most people want their workplace to feel.
Right.
And I know that's not the culture that you wanted to create anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of differences in the leadership styles. And just kind of an odd, I guess, look at it too. Like in the military, you're given, like you've got an org chart, just like you do in a business. And that org chart is, you're not paying those people, right? Like the government's providing them to you, and whether you have a full platoon or company or whatever, it really makes no difference on a financial side. But when you're running a business and you've got your org chart and you're looking at it going, this person makes this, and here's what our monthly burn rate is, and understanding, you look at it totally different, and it's
more complexity.
Yeah, and in the civilian world, you have the right to hire or fire, whereas in the military world, it's a lot. You don't necessarily get to hire. Most times, you get soldiers or service members that get brought to you, and they just get integrated in your element. And you can't. It's really hard to fire somebody too. It's you got to deal with it. So But at the same point, there's a definitely a parallel to the two as well. That they, from a good perspective, like custom home building and being an officer and a leader, the level of discipline and the level of attention to detail very, very high in all those cases. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful.
I want to spend a little bit of time on what the vision is today. And this isn't, this doesn't have to be you selling the vision, but vision means something different to you now. It isn't just a revenue number. It's something bigger than that. What does it look like today? What's it made up of? How do you think about vision, and how does vision guide your decisions on a day-to-day basis?
I think that everything I do is really based on, I keep going back to how I feel. And if I'm feeling relaxed and I'm feeling in a flow state where I can have focus days where I'm working on the things that are working on the business, not in the business. And I'm not feeling stress and pressure. And a lot of that is passed down the line, obviously, because I've got employees that are wearing those hats now. Um, and I think also that you have to recast that vision throughout the year. You've got to, hey, at a minimum, we've got to, make sure that we're delivering a wow customer experience to our customers. Don't forget that. Like, we hire, we fire, we make decisions based on that core value alone. That's probably one of the biggest ones.
Well, in some sense, you having a deeper connection of how you feel is enabling you to run the business different. So when you feel less pressured, when you feel rejuvenated, when you love what you do, when you're working towards something you believe in, you show up different and you run the business different. What is that? How do you run the business differently now?
Yeah, I would say if you ask one of my employees, the difference of who I am now and where I was 2 years ago, they probably saw a very frazzled. It was probably much more obvious to them than it was to me. Um, it was spending very little time with them, giving them just enough advice to get something going, but not pouring into them, not diving into how they're doing personally. Hey, are you going to take some vacations this year? And um, having those conversations is really important. And when you notice that, like where I'm at now, I have a lot more of those conversations. When I say, hey, you got a couple of minutes, come into my office, let's chat for a minute, or hey, let's go to lunch. Probably their initial thought is, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Which I don't think my employees have. They're very empowered and they do a great job. They know what they're supposed to do. But, there's those conversations that are taking place. Like, I'm asking more personal questions, to the point where it makes them feel, like I want to listen to them. It's not just some surface level conversation. Like, I truly care. I learned that from my engineering boss years ago. I noticed him always, he knew every single employee's spouse's name. And I always had admired that and remembered that. And I felt like that was really important. Even if he had a cheat sheet under his desk when I walked in, and
Yeah.
it didn't matter, right? Like,
Didn't matter.
and sometimes I do that even in my phone contacts, so I don't forget. Like, when I meet somebody, like, here, your wife's name is this or whatever. But I think when you start getting to that level where you're not so focused on the day-to-day stuff, you're focused on how they think, how they feel, what makes them feel successful, and how, what's the next step for them in the company, casting some vision on some of those things. And being part of a bigger picture, I think, is, really important. Understanding that vision.
Yeah. Yeah. We're as leaders responsible for the vision and the people that make the results happen.
Yeah.
And I think your story depicts a really big growth plateau that many can undergo to change from revenue drives everything, and I'm just going to work my people to the bone, or I'm going to work my people to the result, whatever that takes, including myself, right? I'll sacrifice myself if I have to. And the second case in your growth path has been, well, I'm going to cast vision. I'm going to take care of my people. My people drive the results the business gets. And you've grown significantly just in the last year from the way that you've shown up and led. Do you think that more people would benefit from taking care of their people? Like, are you seeing, I know we can look at the metrics and say that it's having an improvement, but do you feel the improvement in the way that your people talk to you? Do you sense it in the way that your operations go? Do you sense it with where your customers give you feedback? Does it trickle all the way down that far?
It really does. We still struggle with things, right? We're still, working on systems and processes to make them even better. And sometimes, you fall into that mode where I don't have time to deal with this right now. I got to go run a job and I got to make sure the job gets built. We'll round table this later or whatever. So I don't want to, say that we have everything figured out. I think we're growing still in a lot of different ways. And being in a growth mode, you've got to make those changes. You got to keep up on that stuff. But I think the culture of the employees and the conversations that take place, and yeah, they're stressed at times too. They go through the same stuff. They've got more stress than I do, running these jobs operationally, because it's just so dynamic and so much going on, and multi-million-dollar projects. So to try to get them to feel relaxed and want to come back to the office and collaborate with other people in the office here and just check in and go, how's your day? Oh, it's been, crazy, and I got to deal with this, that, and the other, and this problem happened. And it's just like, oh, I'll just sit in here for 5 minutes. Let's just let's just talk for a couple minutes and work through that. And I think that those little things just go such a long way. We had, there was a fundraiser that Freedom for Heroes was involved with last week, and two of my employees showed up for it. It was it was at a restaurant, and basically whatever you purchased for food, a certain percentage of it went to the nonprofit. And they showed up, and I was just like, those are the types of things that that, when people are showing up outside of work. And even the week before that, I happened to be out of town, but my office manager had sent an email out and said, hey, everybody, so-and-so and I are going to this restaurant tonight at 7:00. Would anybody like to join us? Like, when you see that as a owner or leader, manager, boss, whatever, when you see stuff like that, the culture is great,
Yeah.
And that people enjoy each other, and it's not just about work. They've got other relationships happening, within the company too. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can feel it when you come in that office. When you have the team together, there is a sense of camaraderie, and that there is a mission. There is something that they're working towards in the long run. There is something salient about it. It's real. It's not just an idea. It is an actual thing. That group is all rowing the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, we still have our challenges. Like, a lot of them are slow to adopt the AI thing, as we discussed. Sometimes technology is especially from the company that we took over, they weren't a technology driven company, whereas I am very technology driven. So it brings its own challenges. There's the initial roadblocks that people are like, hold on a second, like, what is this AI thing, or what does this written process thing mean? And so and I guess this is, patting myself on the back here a little bit, but when I merged companies, and I quickly realized, like, okay, this is truly a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're already seeing resistance because two companies are merging together, two cultures, two sets of, ways of solving problems. And I think after like month 2 or something like that, I sat everybody down when we were eating lunch on a Friday, and I was like, look, we've come a really long way. It's the gap in the game mentality. I say that all the time. Let's pat ourselves on the back for it, and let's celebrate some wins. We've done a lot in a very short period of time, but just know my expectations are that we don't solve this in a quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters. I feel like this is a year-long challenge that we all have to go through, and we've got to challenge each other. We've got to question systems and processes and figure out what works best for everybody and collaborate on those things. This isn't, I'm the boss, I own the company, it's my way or the highway. The minute someone starts taking that mentality, that culture just goes out the window. When you've got a leadership team that looks at the owner of the company as an equal, and we make decisions together, we hold each other accountable. Just because I own the company doesn't mean that my ideas, my answers, my thoughts are right. we IDS these, as we call them, identify, discuss, and solve these problems together as a team. Just because I own the company doesn't mean it's going to go my way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's leadership. Dude, that's leadership 101 is know your people and know what they're capable of. They might have a better opinion because they're on the ground with the problem than you might.
Yeah. And guess what? A lot of times they do. I'm really good at the technical stuff and I'm really good at big relationships, but most of the time, they have the answers. They know how to implement them. They know how to get the problem solved.
Yeah. Dude, you've come a long way. Last question here before we wrap. What does it mean to you today to be a visionary? What does that mean to you?
Just constantly using that term visionary has been an evolvement of my leadership as well. And it's really what, when you own a company and you're the CEO or the visionary, whatever people refer to it as, I refer to it as a visionary. To be able to cast vision that other people buy into, agree, and then ultimately execute is very rewarding in itself. Having people follow you and then also their leadership potential increases and they get better and better. It's just, I think it's a huge marker for where we've come as a company and where I've come as a person. I love being able to, to cast vision. It's been my challenge is to stay out of the weeds, stay out of the technical stuff, even though I know the answers, to let go of that vine, and let them do the things that they're best at. And it's a challenge, right? I mean, like you know it all. You've got it all figured out.
Yeah. Well, you've come a long way in depicting something radically different for what your business future looks like. You've come a long way in the way you communicate. You've come a long way in how you delegate and you structure and you care for people. You are easily one of the best, kindest leaders I know. And the way that this vision has changed by removing the revenue pressure, I feel has allowed you to let that leadership shine and your business to soar. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. I would totally agree with that. At the end of the day, we're here to solve a problem. That's what businesses are in business for. Which was another epiphany at some point. I figured that out. But it's so rewarding for me to be able to have the time freedom to be able to build this nonprofit that's ultimately helping a community of veterans that I don't know how this will impact somebody's life. You just don't know until some crazy story comes your way. And in the meantime, you just keep moving forward and you can see the excitement and the joy in those people of those lives we're impacting out in the woods or on a fishing tournament or whatever. So that's, to me, every time that happens, I'm just sort of like, how did I get here? And how is this actually a thing? Like I am doing good. Like you mentioned, how can you run a for-profit and then a nonprofit? And it's really about all the people that support you in terms of, your employees and outside the business as well.
It's cool to see you win. Cool to see you victorious.
Yeah, it feels really good.
Where can people find out more about Freedom for Heroes or Peak One Builders?
Yeah, so probably the website's probably the easiest way, and it's the website is peakonebuilders.com, and the one is spelled out, and the other one is freedomforheroes.org, and the 4 is FOR. And then, of course, the Instagram and Facebook channels.
Love. If you are in the trenches, if you are burnt out, Mike's story hopefully gives you a little hope and allows you to recognize another path forward that might feel blocked. Look, I love what EOS has done. Mike implements it in his business, and it's been really good to structure meetings, roles, accountabilities, and also having vision as a revenue number might be causing more pain than it is creating opportunity. So if you need help with that, feel free to reach out. Mike, I appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
I'm so excited for the people that you're going to impact, and so much good is coming. This is just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe we're just scratching the surface. So thanks for all your support.
Of course. Thanks for tuning in. If you love this episode, leave us a review, send us a thumbs up. subscribe on YouTube, or check us out on Instagram. You can search my name, Aaron Velke. We got a lot more episodes coming your way. We just crossed over episode 100, which is a really big milestone. So if you take a moment on Spotify or Apple to write a review, I'd really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback as you learn more about vision, as you implement more change in your business and start to stretch towards more. We can all be just like Mike and impact more people while we grow a business. We can do both. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thanks again.
See you very soon.